McBride is a village in British Columbia's Robson Valley. McBride is 210 kilometers or 130 miles southeast of Prince George and 166 kilometers or 103 miles west of Jasper. Incorporated in 1932, McBride is surrounded by the Rocky Mountains and Cariboo Ranges. McBride is rich in farmland with a mix of forest and alpine surrounding the valley. McBride is a prime location for many industries, including the railroad, forestry, and tourism. McBride Community Forest Corporation is owned by the Village of McBride. In 2002, the corporation was set up to manage community forest tenure for the village and area. The community forest license grants the village exclusive rights to harvest crown timber from about 60,000 hectares or 148,000 acres. McBride offers outdoor attractions for all seasons. In winter, cross-country skiing, snowmobile trails, and designated snowmobile areas, as well as ice fishing. In warmer months, hiking, camping, fishing, and birdwatching. In 2021, McBride had a population of just under 600. The Jasper Prince Rupert train, operated by Via Rail, serves the McBride station. Via Rail connects McBride with Prince George, Prince Rupert, and Jasper. McBride is relatively wet, especially in summer. Precipitation can be expected an average of 21 days during July. McBride is in the valley formed by the Fraser River between Jasper and Prince George. The valley provided a natural haven for itinerant aircraft while following the Grand Trunk Pacific Railway. On August 2, 1920, 4 aircraft passed over McBride on their way to Prince George from Jasper. The aircraft were de Havilland 4Bs of the U.S. Army Air Service. They were flying to Nome, Alaska from New York. The following year, in July 1921, a Curtiss JN-4 named Polar Bear passed over McBride on a flight from Jasper en route to Prince George. The pilot, Clarence O. Prest of Las Vegas, was on a flight from Mexico to Siberia. The superintendent of Jasper National Park was Colonel Maynard Rogers. Rogers had hoped the use of the Henry House Flats by the U.S. Army Air Service in the summer of 1920 would inspire use of the site by the newly formed Air Board, which by 1922 was established at High River, Alberta. The Air Board had a sub-base at Elkville, east of Rocky Mountain House. Rogers hoped the forest fire patrols would include his park. There is evidence this came to pass with possible use of the Henry House field by the Air Board's de Havilland DH-4s. A picture of a DH-4 in a field at McDonald's farm at McBride is evidence that aircraft based in High River flew into this area. The pictured aircraft is one of 12 gifted to Canada by Great Britain after the First World War. The registration of the DH-4 was covered by a sheet held by several McBride residents except for the letter G. This was required by Canadian authorities in the early 1920s. There was no civil registry of DH-4 aircraft in Canada. It follows that this DH-4 was one from High River. There is one giveaway. Its rudder, by regulation, should have had a large black G on it, but this aircraft does not. It further follows the rudder was a replacement but not yet painted. Another picture of the same aircraft was taken in May 1922 at High River. The only visible identifier, a service number, F2714. Local McBride lore says a DH-4 was the first aircraft to land, and the air crew would agree to a photo only if the registration was covered as, quote, they were not supposed to be here, unquote. On April 17, 1929, a Cessna AW on an endurance flight from Chicago to Siberia passed overhead en route to Prince George. Weather forced it to turn around near the Goat River. It made an emergency landing in a field at McBride. The Cessna became mired in mud. Unable to take off, pilots Shorty Kramer and Will Gamble unloaded most of their gear and remained overnight. Fortunately, it froze that night. Kramer took off the next morning without incident and landed in Prince George later that morning, April 18th. Gamble, with their equipment, followed by rail. In July 1929, another aircraft passed over McBride at about 6,000 feet. The aircraft was a Curtiss Hawk XP-6B of the U.S. Army Air Corps, flown by Captain Ross G. Hoyt. Hoyt was on the return leg of a record flight from New York to Nome. Hoyt had taken off from Whitehorse that morning, intending to fly nonstop to Edmonton. Shortly after passing over McBride, the Hawk's Curtiss Conqueror engine started to fail. Hoyt considered parachuting, but spotted a possible landing field. By now, the engine had lost all power. He dead-sticked the Hawk into a field of soft sand. Just before the aircraft stopped rolling, the right wheel struck a mound, throwing the Hawk on its back. Hoyt, uninjured, crawled from the wreckage. The postmaster from Valemount, a Mr. Cox, came to Hoyt's aid. With the help of several residents, Hoyt was able to right the Hawk, but the damaged aircraft would have to be shipped out by rail. 2 days after his landing, Hoyt left for Edmonton by rail. There was no road to McBride until 1968, when a connection was made between Valemount and Tejon Cache through to Prince George. Until then, the CNR was the sole means of transport in and out of McBride. The people of McBride were quick to appreciate the value of air travel. A small airfield came into use during the 1940s on the farm of Phil Jeck, just under 5 kilometers or 3 miles east of McBride on Jeck Road. In 1951, a 910 by 150 meter or 3,000 by 500 foot field donated by Adolph Jeck was selected for the airstrip. The east-west alignment was on the east side of the river, southeast of the village. In August 1952, A Cessna 170 was the first aircraft to land on the completed runway. In the early 1960s, the airstrip to the north was completed, replacing the former one. McBride's Charlie Leak Field Aerodrome is on the southwest side of the Fraser River, about 1.5 kilometers or almost a mile north-northwest of McBride. In 1972, the airport received a $40,000 federal grant. Over about 20 years, from 1978 to 1997, McBride received grants that enabled a 150-meter or 500-foot runway extension, paving of the apron and taxiway, repaving of the runway, and drainage and other airport upgrades. In 1983, the Village Council approved a new hangar large enough to house 2 aircraft. In 1992, a Rapattack base with helicopter facilities was established for dealing with wildfires, and in 1995, a new helicopter hangar was built. During McBride's 75th anniversary celebrations in 2007, the airport was renamed to honor resident Lieutenant Colonel Charles Leak. A $75,000 grant was applied in 2020 to install an automatic weather observing system. The Village of McBride owns and operates the airport. Infrastructure includes aviation fuel storage, private hangars, and the Rapattack base.